The rain didn't just fall. It felt like the sky was spitting on Camilla Sterling. Standing on the curb with a single, battered suitcase, she watched her ex-husband, Richard, wrap his arm around his mistress in the doorway of the mansion she had cleaned for 3 years. "Don't come crawling back when you starve," he laughed, tossing a $10 bill into a puddle at her feet. His mother cackled from the window. Camilla didn't pick up the money. She simply checked her watch. 3 seconds later, the ground began to shake. Not from thunder, but from a fleet of 6 matte black Rolls-Royce Phantoms turning the corner, shutting down the entire street. The lead car stopped, and a man in a bespoke suit stepped out, bowing low. "Madam Vanderquilt," he boomed, silencing Richard's laugh instantly. "Your empire is waiting." The air conditioning in the conference room of Carter, Lowe and O'Malley was set to a freezing 65 degrees, but Richard Sterling was sweating. He wasn't nervous, he was impatient. He tapped his gold-plated fountain pen against the mahogany table, the rhythmic click, click, click echoing like a countdown. Across from him sat Camilla. For 3 years, she had been Camilla Sterling, the quiet, mousy wife who wore bargain bin cardigans and cooked roast chicken every Sunday for a mother-in-law who openly despised her. Today, she looked even smaller than usual. She was wearing a faded grey trench coat, her hair pulled back in a severe, unstylish bun. Her hands were folded in her lap, motionless. "Well," Richard snapped, checking his Rolex, "we don't have all day, Camilla. The terms are more than generous. $5,000 a month for 6 months. That's enough to get you a studio apartment in the city, or maybe a trailer back in whatever nowhere town I plucked you from." Beside Richard, his mother, Beatrice Sterling, adjusted her pearl necklace. Her face was a mask of haughty disdain. "Rick, you are too kind," she sneered, her voice grating. "She brought nothing into this marriage but debt and bad fashion sense. Why are we giving her alimony at all? It's not like she contributed to the company. While you were building Sterling Tech, she was..." "What?" "Dusting." Camilla didn't look up. She stared at the divorce papers in front of her. The bold text at the top read, "Dissolution of marriage." "It's fine, Mother," Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair with a smirk. "Consider it a charity tax. I need this done today. Jessica and I have plans for the weekend." At the mention of the name Jessica, Camilla's eyes flickered upward for the first time. They were a striking, icy blue, a feature Richard had once claimed to love, but now found unsettlingly blank. "Jessica Price," Camilla said softly. It wasn't a question. Richard rolled his eyes. "Yes, Jessica. A woman who actually understands my world. A woman with status, Camilla. Someone who can stand next to me at a gala and not look like the catering staff. Don't act shocked. You've known for months." "I knew," Camilla admitted, her voice steady. "Then sign the damn papers," Richard hissed, sliding the document closer to her. "And remember the NDA. You talk to the press about the family, about the business, or about Jessica, and I will sue you until you're living in a cardboard box." Camilla reached into her purse. Beatrice tensed, perhaps expecting a weapon or a dramatic reveal of photos. Instead, Camilla pulled out a cheap, plastic ballpoint pen. She didn't argue for more money. She didn't scream about the 3 years of emotional abuse, the isolation, or the nights she spent alone while Richard was working late with Jessica. She simply flipped to the last page and signed, "Camilla." Just Camilla. She had already dropped the Sterling. "Smart girl," Beatrice scoffed. "At least she knows her place." The lawyer, Mr. Carter, looked at Camilla with a flicker of pity. He had seen many discarded wives in this room, but few who surrendered so completely. Ms. Camilla, Are you sure you don't want to review the asset division? Under state law, you might be entitled to a portion of the marital home's appreciation value. I don't want the house, Camilla interrupted, her voice clear. I don't want the money, either. Richard laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Don't try to play the martyr now. Take the money. You'll need it for groceries. Keep it, Camilla said, standing up. She was taller than they remembered, or perhaps she was just standing straighter. I only want one thing. Oh, here we go, Beatrice groaned. The jewelry? The car? The cat, Camilla said. Barnaby. The stray I took in last winter. Richard looked at her as if she were insane. The mangy thing with one ear. Take it. I was going to have the gardener drown it anyway. Camilla flinched, the only sign of emotion she had shown all morning. She picked up her copy of the papers, folded them neatly, and placed them in her bag. Everything else, Camilla said, looking Richard dead in the eye. You can keep. You're going to need it more than I will. Richard slammed his hand on the table. What is that supposed to mean? Is that a threat? It's a prediction, Camilla said calmly. She turned to the door. You have 2 hours to vacate the premises, Richard shouted after her, his face reddening. If you're not off the property by noon, I'm calling the police to have you removed for trespassing. Camilla didn't look back. As she walked down the long, marble corridor of the law firm, she pulled her phone from her pocket. It was an old model with a cracked screen. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 3 years. It rang once. It's done, she whispered into the receiver. Initiate Protocol 0. A deep, gravelly voice on the other end responded immediately. Acknowledged, Miss Vanderquilt. The convoy is en route. ETA, 45 minutes. Camilla hung up and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, burying her reflection in steel, the mousy housewife died, and the heiress began to wake up. The Sterling estate was located in the prestigious Highland Park district of Dallas, a sprawling mock Tudor mansion surrounded by 10-foot hedges and wrought-iron gates. It was a symbol of new money, loud, expensive, and lacking in history. Camilla moved through the master bedroom with mechanical efficiency. She didn't pack clothes. The designer dresses Richard had forced her to wear, gaudy things meant to show off his wealth, remained on their hangers. She didn't take the jewelry, not even the diamond wedding band. She left it on the nightstand next to a half-empty bottle of scotch. She packed only a small duffel bag with a few worn t-shirts, a pair of jeans, and an old leather-bound journal. She walked down to the kitchen, picked up the travel carrier containing Barnaby the cat, and headed for the front door. She was 10 minutes early for her deadline. As she stepped onto the grand porch, a bright red Ferrari roared up the driveway, spraying gravel onto the pristine lawn. It screeched to a halt behind Richard's silver Bentley. The door swung open, and Jessica Price stepped out. She was stunning in a predatory way, blonde hair blown out to perfection, wearing a white Chanel suit that cost more than Camilla's theoretical alimony for a year. She removed her sunglasses, her eyes scanning Camilla with amused contempt. "Leaving so soon?" Jessica cooed, leaning against the hood of the Ferrari. "I was hoping to help you pack. I need to clear out the closet space. Richard promised me a renovation." Richard's car pulled up seconds later. He jumped out, looking energized by the divorce, high on his own perceived freedom. He jogged over to Jessica, planting a kiss on her cheek right in front of Camilla. "Is she gone yet?" Richard asked Jessica, acting as if Camilla wasn't standing 5 feet away. "Just saying her goodbyes," Jessica giggled. She looked at Camilla's duffel bag and the cat carrier. "That's it? That's all you have to show for 3 years of marriage?" God, Rick, she really was pathetic. "I told you," Richard sneered. "She was a charity case. I found her waitressing at a diner in Oklahoma. Thought I could—" Refine her. But you can't put polish on a brick. Camilla descended the stairs. She stopped on the bottom step, looking at the couple. The sky had turned a dark, bruised purple. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and threatening. "Richard," Camilla said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the humid air. "What?" he barked, turning to her. "Begging for a ride? The bus stop is 2 miles down the road. Better start walking before the storm hits." "I just wanted to thank you," Camilla said. Richard blinked, confused. Jessica let out a sharp laugh. "She's thanking you for dumping her. That's rich." "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are," Camilla continued, ignoring Jessica, "and for showing me that I don't need to hide anymore." "Hide?" Richard scoffed. "You were a housewife, Camilla. You didn't hide anything except maybe a few pounds under those baggy sweaters. Get out of here. You're depressing me." He made a shooing motion with his hand. "Go on. Scram." Camilla tightened her grip on the cat carrier and walked past them. She walked down the long driveway, past the fountain Richard had installed last month, past the security cameras that had watched her every move. She reached the massive iron gates. They were open. She stepped onto the public sidewalk just as the clouds broke. It started as a drizzle, then quickly escalated into a torrential downpour. Within seconds, Camilla's trench coat was soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She looked like the picture of misery, a discarded woman standing alone on the side of the road in a storm. From the safety of the covered porch, Richard and Jessica watched. Richard pulled out his phone. "This is priceless," he laughed, snapping a photo of Camilla's solitary figure against the rain. "I'm sending this to Mother." Caption: "Trash day came early." Jessica leaned into him. "You're terrible. I love it." "She's waiting for an Uber," Richard mocked. "She probably can't even afford the surge pricing. Look at her, just standing there." Camilla wasn't checking a ride-share app. She was looking at the time on her watch. It was 12 p.m. exactly. 3, 2, 1, she whispered. At first it was just a vibration in the pavement, a low hum that grew into a roar. Richard frowned, lowering his phone. "What is that noise?" Around the corner of the winding residential street, headlights pierced the rain. They were blindingly bright, high-intensity xenon beams. A massive black SUV, a Cadillac Escalade with reinforced plating, swung around the bend. Then another. Then a sleek, matte black Rolls-Royce Phantom. Then 3 more SUVs. It was a motorcade, a presidential-level convoy moving with aggressive precision. "What the hell?" Richard muttered, stepping off the porch. "Is the governor in town? Why are they coming down our street?" The convoy didn't pass. The lead SUV swerved, blocking the road to the left. The rear SUV blocked the road to the right. The Rolls-Royce glided silently to a halt right in front of where Camilla was standing. The sheer presence of the vehicles was intimidating. These weren't just expensive cars, they were armored transports. They bore small flags on the fenders, a crest of a golden lion holding a key. Richard's face went pale. That's the Vanderquilt crest." "Who?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling slightly. "The Vanderquilts," Richard whispered, fear creeping into his tone. "Old money. Not like us. Real money. They own half of Europe's shipping lines, and most of the tech patents we use at Sterling Tech. What are they doing here?" The rear door of the Rolls-Royce opened, but before the passenger emerged, a man from the front passenger seat jumped out. He was a giant, easily 6'5", holding a massive black umbrella. He moved with blur-like speed, positioning the umbrella over Camilla before a single drop of rain could hit her again. He bowed. It wasn't a polite nod. It was a bow of deep, deferential servitude. "My apologies for the delay, madam," the man said, his voice booming over the sound of the rain. Traffic on the tollway was unacceptable. We have acquired the tollway authority to ensure it does not happen again." Camilla handed him the cat carrier. "Ideally, Silas. Is the jet ready?" "Fueled and waiting, madam. Your father is eager to debrief you." Richard stumbled down the driveway, the rain soaking his expensive shirt instantly. Hey, wait a minute," he shouted, driven by a mix of confusion and indignation. "What is going on? Camilla?" Silas, the bodyguard, turned. He didn't speak. He simply looked at Richard. The look was so cold, so utterly devoid of humanity, that Richard stopped dead in his tracks 10 feet away. Camilla turned slowly. She looked at Richard, then at Jessica, who was cowering on the porch. Camilla reached up and pulled the pins from her hair. Her wet, dark locks tumbled down her back. She took off her glasses and threw them into the gutter. Her posture shifted. The slouch was gone. In its place was an imperious, regal, terrifying grace. Who are you?" Richard stammered. Camilla smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You spent 3 years calling me a nobody, Richard," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly over the storm. "You were right. Camilla Sterling was a nobody. She never existed." She stepped toward the open door of the Rolls-Royce. "My name," she said, looking back over her shoulder, "is Camilla Vanderquilt, and you have just made the biggest mistake of your life." She slid into the leather interior. Silas slammed the door shut. The convoy peeled away, tires gripping the wet asphalt, leaving Richard Sterling standing in the rain, soaked, confused, and suddenly feeling very, very small. The interior of the Rolls-Royce Phantom was a sanctuary of silence. As the heavy door latched shut, the sound of the storm, and Richard's frantic shouting, was instantly severed. The world outside was grey and chaotic, but inside, the air was scented with sandalwood and aged leather. The temperature was a perfect 68 degrees. Camilla leaned back into the deep, massaging seat. For 3 years, she had sat on lumpy sofas, driven a 10-year-old sedan with a broken heater, and slept on a mattress that gave her back pain. Her body instinctively relaxed into the luxury she had been born into, a muscle memory she had suppressed for the sake of a love that turned out to be a lie. Silas sat in the front passenger seat, watching her through the rearview mirror with protective intensity. He didn't speak immediately. He knew the protocol. He waited until Camilla let out a long, shuddering breath, her eyes closed, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. "The champagne is chilled, madam," Silas said softly. 1959. Dom Perignon. Your favorite. Camilla opened her eyes. She looked at the crystal flute resting in the holder. She reached for it, her fingers brushing against the cold glass. She didn't drink. She just held it, grounding herself. "Connect me to the chairman," she said. Her voice was no longer the soft, apologetic whisper of Camilla Sterling. It was low, resonant, and devoid of hesitation. "He is already on the secure line," Silas replied. He tapped a console on the dashboard. A screen descended from the roof of the car. The image flickered for a moment, before resolving into the face of an older man sitting in a library that looked more like a museum. Arthur Vanderquilt, the patriarch of a dynasty that rivaled nations in GDP, looked at his daughter. His face was a map of hard lines and ruthless decisions, but his eyes held a glimmer of relief. "Camilla," Arthur said. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't offer sympathy. Vanderquilts didn't deal in sympathy. They dealt in assessments. "Is the experiment concluded?" "Concluded," Camilla confirmed. She took a sip of the champagne. It tasted like home. The hypothesis was incorrect. A normal life does not breed humility in others. It breeds contempt. Arthur nodded slowly. "I warned you. You wanted to know if a man could love you for you, not for the billions attached to your name. You found a man who had nothing, assuming he would appreciate everything. Instead, you found a parasite. He wasn't just a parasite, Father, Camilla said, looking out the tinted window as the convoy merged onto the private access road for Dallas Love Field Airport. He was cruel. He took my silence for weakness. He took my kindness for stupidity. And now? Arthur asked. Now, Camilla said, her grip on the glass tightening. I am done being kind. The convoy swept through the security gates of the airfield, bypassing the commercial terminals entirely. They drove directly onto the tarmac where a massive aircraft waited. It wasn't a standard Gulfstream or Learjet. It was a customized Boeing 787 Dreamliner, painted in midnight blue with the golden lion crest on the tail. The Titan. As the car stopped, Camilla looked at the screen one last time. Father, initiate the acquisition of the secondary lenders holding Sterling Tech's debt. I want a full audit of their supply chain by morning, and freeze the assets of the shell company Richard uses to hide his business expenses for his mistresses. Arthur smiled, a rare, shark-like expression. The legal team has been on standby for 48 hours. We already own the bank that holds his mortgage. We were just waiting for your signal. Burn it, Camilla whispered. Burn it all down. But do it slowly. I want him to feel the heat before he sees the fire. Welcome back, my dear, Arthur said, and the screen went black. Silas opened the car door. The rain had stopped, replaced by a humid, heavy mist. Camilla stepped out onto the tarmac. A flight crew of 6 stood at attention at the base of the stairs, heads bowed. Welcome home, Miss Vanderquilt, the captain said. Camilla walked up the stairs, the click of her heels on the metal echoing like gunshots. She paused at the top and looked back toward the city skyline, a grey smudge in the distance. Somewhere in that smudge was the house she had scrubbed on her hands and knees. Somewhere there was a man laughing at her photo, thinking he had won. She stepped into the plane. The door sealed shut. She went straight to the master suite at the back of the plane, a room larger than the studio apartment Richard had mocked her with. She walked into the walk-in closet, stripping off the cheap, damp clothes she had worn as Camilla Sterling. She let the grey trench coat fall to the floor in a heap. She showered, scrubbing the scent of pine sol and cheap detergent from her skin. When she emerged, she dressed in a silk robe that cost more than Richard's car. She sat at her vanity, looking at her reflection. For 3 years, she had worn no makeup, pulled her hair back, and made herself small. Now, she began to apply her war paint, a sharp winged liner, a deep, blood-red lipstick. She brushed her hair until it shone like obsidian. Barnaby, the one-eared cat, was already curled up on a velvet pillow on the bed, eating from a china bowl filled with fresh salmon. Camilla petted him gently. We're going to be fine, Barnaby, she murmured. But they aren't. Silas knocked on the doorframe. Madam, we are airborne. We will arrive in New York in 3 hours. There is one more thing. Speak. Mr. Sterling posted the photo, Silas said, holding out a tablet. On his social media. And his mother has given a statement to a local gossip blog calling you a gold-digging fraud. Camilla took the tablet. She saw the photo of herself standing in the rain, looking pathetic. The caption read, Usually I donate my old clothes to charity. Today, I just threw the whole person out. New beginnings. By Felicia. It had 400 likes. Most were from his sycophantic employees. Camilla didn't get angry. She felt a cold, clinical calm wash over her. Do we own the platform hosting this blog? Camilla asked. We own the parent company that hosts the server farm, Silas clarified. Leave it up, Camilla said, handing the tablet back. "Let the world see it. I want there to be a record of his arrogance. It will make his fall so much more entertaining to watch." She turned back to the window, watching the clouds rush by. She picked up a heavy, gold-embossed folder from the desk. The cover read, "Project Sterling, Dismantling Phase." She opened it. The silence in the Sterling mansion was suffocating. An hour had passed since the convoy had vanished. Richard Sterling sat on the oversized white leather sofa in the living room, a towel draped around his shoulders. He was shivering, but not from the cold. He was staring at the wall, his mind trying to reboot, unable to process the data it had just received. Beatrice Sterling was pacing back and forth on the Persian rug, her heels digging into the fabric. She held a glass of sherry in a shaking hand. "It's a stunt," Beatrice declared, her voice shrill. "It has to be. She hired actors. That's it. She spent whatever savings she skimmed off the grocery money and hired a few limousines to make us jealous. It's pathetic, really." Jessica Price was less convinced. She was sitting on the arm of the sofa, scrolling furiously on her phone. Her face, usually perfectly composed, was pale. "Richard," Jessica said, her voice tight. "Did you see the license plates?" "What?" Richard snapped, looking up. "Who cares about the plates?" "They were diplomatic plates, Rick," Jessica said, turning the phone screen toward him. "And that crest, the lion and the key. I just Googled it. It's a logo, Jess. Anyone can make a logo." "Not this one," she whispered. "It belongs to the Vanderquilt Global Consortium. They are... Rick, they are the largest private equity firm in the Western Hemisphere. They own Aerogen, Vanderquilt Shipping, North Atlantic Bank. They even have a controlling stake in the company that manufactures your microchips." Richard snatched the phone from her. He stared at the Wikipedia page. The Vanderquilt family. One of the wealthiest and most reclusive families in the world. Current patriarch, Arthur Vanderquilt. Sole heiress, Camilla Elizabeth Vanderquilt. Whereabouts unknown since 2023. 2023, the year Richard had met Camilla at that diner in Oklahoma. She had told him she was a runaway from a bad foster home. He had believed her because her clothes were ragged and she looked hungry. "No," Richard muttered, shaking his head. No, it's impossible. She scrubbed my toilets, Mother. She let you scream at her for undercooking the roast. Why would a billionaire heiress do that?" Beatrice stopped pacing. The color drained from her face as the realization hit her. "A test," she breathed. "It's like those fairy tales. The princess dresses as a peasant to find a suitor who loves her for her heart." She looked at her son with horror. "And you treated her like garbage." "I treated her like a wife," Richard yelled, standing up. "I gave her a roof over her head." "You cheated on her," Jessica pointed out, her voice rising. "Openly, and you just kicked her out into a storm with $10. "You were right there with me," Richard screamed at her. "Because I thought she was a nobody," Jessica shrieked back. "I didn't know I was mocking the woman who could buy my entire family tree." The landline phone on the marble side table began to ring. It was a harsh, jarring sound in the tense room. Richard stared at it. Few people called the landline. It was mostly for business emergencies. He walked over and picked it up. "Hello? Mr. Richard Sterling?" A voice on the other end spoke. It was cool, professional, and terrifyingly polite. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Mr. Henderson from First Horizon Bank. I'm calling regarding your business lines of credit and the mortgage on the Highland Park property." Richard let out a breath. "Look, Henderson, if this is about the late fee on the corporate card, my accountant is handling it, Mr. Sterling. As of 10 minutes ago, First Horizon has been acquired by a holding company. Under the new management's risk assessment policies, we have been instructed to call in all high-risk loans immediately. Richard froze. Call in? You can't do that. I have 30-year terms. Check clause 14B of your contract, sir. The change of management clause. We have the right to demand full repayment of the principal if the bank's ownership changes. You owe $4.2 million on the house and $12 million on the Sterling Tech expansion loan. I don't have $16 million in liquid cash, Richard shouted. You know that. My assets are tied up in inventory. Then we will begin foreclosure proceedings on the home and seizure of business assets at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow, Henderson said. Have a pleasant day, Mr. Sterling. The line went dead. Richard dropped the phone. It clattered onto the table. What? Beatrice asked, clutching her pearls. What is it? The bank, Richard whispered, his eyes wide with panic. They're calling in the loans, all of them. Tomorrow. Before Beatrice could scream, Richard's cell phone buzzed. Then Jessica's phone buzzed. Richard looked at his screen. It was a text from his chief operating officer, COO. Message. Rick, we have a problem. The supply trucks from Taiwan just turned around. The shipping company says our contract is voided. They've been blacklisted. We can't get the chips for the new launch. Production is halted. The chips? Richard gasped. The shipping lines. Jessica looked up from her phone, her face ashen. Rick, my dad just texted me. He's on the board of the country club. I don't care about your dad's golf game, Jessica. He says you've been banned, lifetime ban, for conduct unbecoming of a gentleman. They're removing your plaque from the locker room right now. It was happening. It wasn't a slow erosion, it was a landslide. Beatrice sank onto the sofa, spilling her sherry. She's erasing us, she whimpered. She's not just leaving, Richard. She's erasing us. Richard ran a hand through his hair, pulling at the roots. His arrogance was cracking, revealing the terrified boy underneath. He paced the room, manic energy taking over. Okay, calm down. We can fix this. It's just business. I'll call her. I'll apologize. She loved me. She spent 3 years waiting on me hand and foot. You don't turn that off in a day. He fumbled for his phone, scrolling through his contacts to find wife. He hit dial. The number you have reached is no longer in service. He dialed again. Same result. She changed it. He spat. Okay, I'll go to her. Where did that car go? The airport. She's probably going back to wherever Vanderquilts live. New York? London? You can't go to her, Jessica said, stepping back from him. She looked at Richard like he was a contagion. Rick, if she can buy your bank in an hour, what do you think she'll do if you show up at her door? I have to try, Richard yelled. Sterling Tech is my life. This house is my life. Well, it's not mine, Jessica said, coldly. She grabbed her purse. What are you doing? Richard asked. I'm leaving, Jessica said. I'm not going down with this ship. I was dating a successful CEO, not a bankrupt loser who pissed off the most powerful woman in the country. Jessica, Richard pleaded, reaching for her arm. She slapped his hand away. Don't touch me, and delete my number. I don't want to be named in the lawsuit. She walked out the front door, the click of her heels echoing the same way Camilla's had, but without the grace. Richard stood in the center of his living room. The rain outside had started again, tapping against the windows like 1,000 fingers asking to be let in. Beatrice began to sob. We're going to be poor, Richard. I can't be poor. I'm too old to be poor. Richard stared at the divorce papers still sitting on the coffee table. He looked at the signature on the last page. Camilla. It wasn't a signature. It was a death warrant. And the worst part was, he knew, deep down in the pit of his stomach, that this was only the first hour. The morning sun hit the glass facade of Sterling Tech with an irony that Richard Sterling couldn't appreciate. Usually the site of his headquarters, a sleek, 6-story building in the tech corridor, filled him with a sense of godlike accomplishment. Today, it looked like a tombstone. Richard parked his silver Bentley in the spot marked CEO. He noticed immediately that the space next to his, usually reserved for the CFO, was empty. In fact, the executive lot was disturbingly barren. He adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror. He looked haggard. The bags under his eyes were dark purple bruises, a souvenir from a sleepless night spent pacing the floor, while Beatrice wept over the potential loss of her country club status. He had tried to shave, but his hand had shaken, leaving a small nick on his jawline that stung in the dry air. "Pull it together," he hissed at his reflection. "You are Richard Sterling. You built this. She's just a girl who got lucky with her DNA." He grabbed his briefcase and marched toward the automatic glass doors. He needed to project power. If he looked weak, the sharks would circle. He reached for the door handle, but the sensors didn't trigger. The doors remained shut. Frowning, he pulled his keycard from his pocket and tapped it against the reader. Beep, beep, access denied. "Ridiculous," he muttered. He tapped it again. Access denied. He pounded on the glass. Inside, the reception desk was manned by frantic-looking staff. Chloe, the receptionist who usually greeted him with a flirtatious smile and a hot latte, looked up. She saw him. Her face went pale. Instead of buzzing him in, she picked up her phone and whispered something urgently. A moment later, the side door opened. It wasn't Chloe. It was Paulson, the head of security, a man Richard had hired 5 years ago. "Paulson, the system is glitching," Richard snapped, stepping forward. "Open the main doors, and get it on this immediately." Paulson didn't move. He stood in the doorway, his massive frame blocking the entrance. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Mr. Sterling, I can't let you in." Richard stopped. "Excuse me. Do you know who signs your checks, Paulson?" "That's the thing, sir," Paulson said, his voice low. "You don't. Not anymore." "What are you talking about?" "The board convened an emergency meeting at 6 a.m., Paulson explained, looking at the ground. "They invoked the moral turpitude clause in your contract, citing the reputational damage from the internet, sir, and the financial instability caused by the called loans." "The internet?" Richard felt the world tilting. "What about the internet?" Paulson sighed and pulled out his phone. He hesitated, then turned the screen toward Richard. It was a TikTok video. It had 12 million views. It was a montage. It started with Richard's photo, the one he had taken of Camilla in the rain. The caption he wrote, "Trash Day came early," was highlighted in neon red. Then it cut to a clip from a traffic camera that someone had leaked. It showed the convoy, the Rolls-Royce stopping, the bodyguard bowing, the sheer, undeniable power of the Vanderquilt arrival. Then came the commentary. A young woman with blue hair was speaking to the camera. "So let me get this straight. This guy, the CEO of budget brand Sterling Tech, kicks out Camilla Vanderquilt. The Camilla Vanderquilt? The woman whose family literally invented the shipping logistics he uses to move his product? He treated a billionaire heiress like a servant for 3 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the biggest fumble in human history. Team Camilla. Boycott Sterling." Richard stared at the screen. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. Imagine fumbling the bag this hard. "I just cancelled my Sterling subscription. Hope he likes ramen noodles." "They voted to remove you, sir," Paulson said gently, taking the phone back. "Effective immediately. Your access codes have been scrubbed. They're packing your personal effects in a box now. They'll bring it out to you." "I am the founder," Richard screamed, his voice cracking. "They can't fire me from my own company." "They can when you don't own the majority share anymore," a crisp, female voice cut in. Richard looked past Paulson. Walking through the lobby was a woman in a sharp navy suit. He recognized her. It was Eleanor Vance, a corporate shark from New York, known for dismantling companies for parts. "Who are you?" Richard demanded. "I'm the interim CEO, appointed by the new majority shareholder," Eleanor said, stopping safely behind the glass. "Vanderquilt Global acquired 51% of Sterling Tech's outstanding shares in pre-market trading this morning. It cost them pocket change, really. The stock price tanked overnight thanks to your social media presence." Richard felt bile rise in his throat. Camilla. She hadn't just sued him. She had bought him. "I want to speak to her," Richard said, pressing his hand against the glass. "Tell her I need to talk to her." Eleanor laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Vanderquilt is currently in meetings with the Prime Minister of Japan regarding trade routes. She doesn't have time for a terminated mid-level manager." Eleanor signaled to Paulson. "Escort him off the property, Paulson. If he returns, call the police." Eleanor turned on her heel and walked away, disappearing into the elevator that led to his office. Paulson stepped forward. "Please, sir, don't make me do this." Richard backed away. He looked at the building one last time. He saw faces pressed against the windows on the upper floors. His employees, the people he had terrorized, underpaid and bragged to. They were watching him. He turned and ran. He scrambled into his Bentley, his hands shaking so hard he dropped his keys on the asphalt. He scrabbled for them, scratching the expensive leather fob. As he sped out of the parking lot, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from his credit card company. Alert. Transaction declined at Starbucks. Reason: account frozen. He hit the steering wheel, screaming until his throat was raw. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making, and the architect of his destruction was the woman who used to rub his feet after work. 5 days later, the silence in the Sterling mansion was worse than the screaming. The house was dark. Richard had turned off the lights to save electricity, a habit he had once mocked Camilla for. Beatrice was in her room, refusing to come out. She had tried to go to the grocery store 2 days ago, but her card had been declined, and a cashier had recognized her from the news. "Aren't you the lady who called the heiress a gold digger?" the girl had asked, loud enough for the whole line to hear. Beatrice had fled, leaving her cart behind. Richard sat at the kitchen island, staring at a laptop he had managed to keep hidden from the asset seizure team. He was drinking cheap vodka from a plastic cup. He looked unrecognizable. He hadn't shaved in a week. His shirt was stained. The arrogance that had defined his face was replaced by a hollow, frantic look. He was refreshing the Dallas Socialite webpage. Event of the season: the Vanderquilt Foundation Winter Solstice Gala. It was tonight. The article described it as an assembly of the world's elite. Kings, queens, tech moguls, and old money dynasties were descending on the Winslow Palace Hotel downtown. The purpose of the gala was to unveil the new direction of the Vanderquilt Empire, and the host was Camilla. Richard zoomed in on the photo accompanying the article. It was a paparazzi shot of Camilla entering the hotel earlier that day. She wore oversized sunglasses and a scarf, but the way she carried herself, chin up, shoulders back, was magnetic. "I have to go," Richard whispered. He stood up, swaying slightly. The alcohol buzzed in his head, feeding a delusion that had been growing for days. "She doesn't hate me," he told himself. "She's doing this to teach me a lesson. She wants me to fight for her. That's what women want, right? The grand gesture. If I show up, if I prove I'm willing to humiliate myself to get her back, she'll stop this. It was the logic of a desperate narcissist, but it was the only lifeline he had. He went to his closet. Most of his suits were gone, seized by the creditors or sold by Beatrice online for quick cash. But tucked in the back, in a garment bag he had forgotten, was his tuxedo. It was a little tight, and it smelled of mothballs, but it was black tie. He dressed with frantic energy. He slicked his greasy hair back. He found a pair of cufflinks in a drawer, fake gold, but they would pass in dim light. He didn't have a car. The Bentley had been repossessed yesterday. A tow truck had dragged it away while he watched from the window. He called a taxi. He had $40 left in cash, the money he had found in a coat pocket. The Winslow Palace Hotel was a fortress of light. Searchlights swept the sky. A red carpet stretched from the curb, flanked by velvet ropes and hundreds of screaming onlookers hoping to catch a glimpse of a celebrity. Richard got out of the taxi a block away. He couldn't let them see him arriving in a yellow cab. He walked the rest of the way, the cold wind biting through his thin tuxedo jacket. At the entrance, security was tighter than the Pentagon. Burly men with earpieces checked invitations with UV scanners. Richard's heart hammered against his ribs. He didn't have an invitation. He walked up to the side entrance, near the catering trucks. He saw a group of waiters smoking by the loading dock. He waited until they stubbed out their cigarettes and went back inside. He caught the heavy metal door before it clicked shut. He slipped into the kitchen. The heat hit him instantly, smelling of truffle oil and roasted duck. He kept his head down, walking briskly, pretending to belong. He grabbed a tray of empty champagne flutes from a counter to look busy. He navigated the labyrinth of corridors until he heard the hum of conversation and the clinking of glass. He pushed through a set of double doors and stepped into the ballroom. It was breathtaking. The ceiling was draped in white silk and thousands of hanging crystals that caught the light like frozen rain. The centerpieces were towering arrangements of white orchids and silver branches. The room smelled of expensive perfume and money. Richard set the tray down on a side table and blended into the crowd. He felt small. Everyone here looked polished, glowing with health and wealth. He felt dirty, like a smudge on a pristine painting. He scanned the room. He saw the governor of Texas laughing with a movie star. He saw the CEO of his biggest competitor shaking hands with a Saudi prince. And then the room went silent. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the grand staircase at the far end of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice announced over the speakers, "the chairwoman of the Vanderquilt Foundation, Ms. Camilla Vanderquilt." Richard stopped breathing. Camilla appeared at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a gown of liquid gold. It clung to her frame, cascading down to the floor in a shimmering pool. Her hair was loose, a dark waterfall over her shoulders. Around her neck sat a necklace of sapphires and diamonds that looked heavy enough to crush a lesser woman. She didn't look like the Camilla he knew. The Camilla he knew was soft, pliable, eager to please. This woman was a statue come to life, beautiful, cold, and terrifying. She descended the stairs slowly. The applause was polite, restrained, and deeply respectful. Richard began to push through the crowd. "Camilla," he whispered, but his voice was swallowed by the music that began to play. He elbowed past a senator. He stepped on the train of a duchess's dress. He didn't care. He had to get to her. Camilla reached the bottom of the stairs. A man stepped forward to offer her his arm. It wasn't a bodyguard this time. It was a man Richard recognized from business magazines. Julian Thorpe, a European shipping magnate, young, handsome, and worth 10 times what Richard had been worth at his peak. Camilla smiled at Julian. It was a genuine smile. Jealousy, hot and irrational, exploded in Richard's chest. "Camilla!" he shouted, breaking decorum. He lunged out of the crowd, stumbling into the open space of the dance floor. The music faltered. Heads turned. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Richard stood there, panting, his tuxedo rumpled, his hair coming undone. He looked like a madman. Camilla stopped. She turned slowly to face him. Julian stepped in front of her protectively, but Camilla placed a hand on his arm to stop him. She looked at Richard. Her expression didn't change. No anger, no fear. Just a mild, detached curiosity, as if she were looking at a bug she couldn't quite identify. "Richard," she said. Her voice was amplified by the acoustics of the room, clear and calm. "You're trespassing." I needed to see you," Richard stammered, walking forward. Two security guards started toward him, but Camilla held up a hand. They froze. "I need to talk to you, Camilla. Please, just 5 minutes." "You had 3 years, Richard," Camilla said. "You spent them talking at me, not to me." "I made a mistake," Richard cried, tears pricking his eyes. He dropped to his knees. A collective murmur of shock went through the crowd. Richard Sterling, on his knees, begging. "I was an idiot. I didn't know who you were. I'm sorry. Please, baby, I'm sorry. Call off the banks. Call off the lawyers. I love you." He reached out a hand toward her. Camilla looked at his outstretched hand. Then she looked at the crowd. She saw the phones out, recording. She saw the judgment in their eyes. She took a step closer, but she didn't take his hand. She leaned down, just enough so that her voice carried only to him and the front row of spectators. "You don't love me, Richard," she said softly. "You love the access I could have given you. You love the money I'm wearing around my neck. You're not crying because you lost me. You're crying because you lost." "That's not true." "It is," she said, straightening up. "You told me once that I was a nobody. You were right. Camilla Sterling was a fiction. But Camilla Vanderquilt, she doesn't have time for charity cases." She turned to the security guards. "Silas," she said. Silas materialized from the shadows, looking like a mountain in a tuxedo. "Take the trash out," Camilla said. Silas grabbed Richard by the back of his collar. Richard kicked and screamed. "Camilla! Camilla, you can't do this. I'm your husband." "Ex-husband," she corrected, not looking back. She took Julian's arm. "Shall we dance?" The orchestra struck up a waltz. As Richard was dragged out of the ballroom, screaming and flailing, the last thing he saw was Camilla Vanderquilt spinning in the arms of another man, her gold dress catching the light, shining like the sun he had tried to stare down and lost. The heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off his view forever. 6 months later, the smell of burnt grease was the only perfume Richard Sterling knew. He stood behind the counter of Sal's Burger Joint, a roadside diner on the outskirts of Oklahoma City, ironically, only a few miles from where he had first found Camilla. He wasn't the manager. He wasn't even the head chef. He was the relief line cook, wearing a stained white apron, scraping blackened cheese off the flat-top grill. His assets had been liquidated. The house was gone, bought by a tech mogul from Silicon Valley. The Bentley was auctioned off to pay his legal fees. Beatrice had been moved into a state-subsidized assisted living facility, where she spent her days complaining to nurses who didn't care about her former social standing. Jessica Price had married a 70-year-old oil tycoon 3 weeks after the breakup. Richard wiped his brow with a greasy rag. The diner was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the small television mounted in the corner. "Hey, Rick!" the manager shouted from the back. "Turn up the volume. This is the big press conference." Richard looked up. On the screen, the logo of Vanderquilt Sterling Industries flashed. He flinched at the name. She had kept his name on the company, but only as a trophy of her conquest. Camilla appeared on the screen. She looked radiant, sitting next to Julian Thorpe, her new fiancé. But it wasn't a wedding announcement. It was a product launch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Camilla said, her voice confident and warm, "today we are revolutionizing the energy sector. We are unveiling the EcoCore processor, a microchip that reduces data center energy consumption by 40%. Richard froze. The EcoCore. "The design for this chip," Camilla continued, smiling at the camera, "came to me during a very quiet, very lonely period of my life. I spent 3 years sketching it on napkins and in journals, trying to solve the heat dispersion problem." The camera zoomed in on a screen behind her. It showed the original blueprints. They were hand-drawn sketches of a complex, layered circuit. Richard dropped his spatula. It clattered loudly on the floor. He knew those sketches. 3 years ago, Camilla had come into his home office, her eyes bright, holding a stack of papers. "Richard, look, I had an idea for the overheating issue you're having with the servers," she had said. He remembered his response. He had laughed. He had taken the paper, used it to wipe a coffee ring off his mahogany desk, and tossed it in the trash. "Stick to the laundry, Camilla. Leave the engineering to the men." He stared at the TV, his breath hitching in his throat. He hadn't just thrown away a billionaire heiress. He hadn't just thrown away a loving wife. He had thrown away the very invention that would have saved his company. He had held the winning lottery ticket in his hand, used it as a rag, and discarded it. "This patent," the reporter on the TV voiceover said, "is estimated to be worth $12 billion. Richard fell back against the counter, sliding down until he hit the dirty linoleum floor. He buried his face in his hands. The irony wasn't just cruel, it was absolute. The door of the diner opened. The bell jingled. A man in a suit walked in. It was Mr. Henderson, the banker who had foreclosed on his home. He looked around the dumpy diner, spotted Richard on the floor, and approached him. "Mr. Sterling." Richard looked up, eyes red. "What? You want the apron too?" "No," Henderson said. He placed a thick envelope on the counter. "Ms. Vanderquilt asked me to deliver this. She knew you would be here." Richard opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a check. The check was for $10. The note was handwritten in elegant cursive. For the taxi back to reality. "Camilla." Richard looked at the $10, the exact amount he had thrown in the puddle at her feet the day she left. He started to laugh. It was a broken, wheezing sound that made the other patrons look away nervously. He laughed until the tears came, hot and stinging, washing away the last of his pride as the credits rolled on the screen above him. So, what's the real tragedy of Richard Sterling? It wasn't that he lost his money. It's that he spent 3 years looking for treasure all over the world, desperate for status and validation, while the most valuable diamond of all was sleeping right next to him every single night. He was so blinded by what he thought power looked like, loud, flashy, and arrogant, that he couldn't recognize it when it was quiet, kind, and patient. Camilla didn't destroy him. She simply let him destroy himself by giving him exactly what he asked for, a life without her. If you enjoyed this story of karma and ultimate revenge, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Camilla? Would you have given him the $10 or left him with nothing? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about justice being served cold, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on today. They might be the one driving the Rolls-Royce tomorrow. See you in the next one.